Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's session, we are going to discuss a very important topic, and that's called stress management, right? We all know that stress management is a very important topic in organizational behavior. We will be covering this particular topic in two parts. So this is the first part of this particular lecture. So let's begin. So before we start today's session, we need to understand what are the things we are going to cover in this lecture. One, we'll be covering about what is stress. We'll be also discussing about the causes of stress in the organizational settings. We will also be discussing about the consequences of stress at different levels. So these are the things which we will be discussing in this first session, and in the part 2 of this particular session, we'll be discussing about how we can manage stress, right? So let's talk about what is stress first. So stress can be defined as a dynamic condition in which an individual is confronted with an opportunity, demand or resource related to what the individual desire and for which the outcome is perceived to be both uncertain and important. This definition looks very complex. So what we can do is we can break down this definition into different parts. The first important thing, it's a dynamic situation, it's a dynamic condition. So it is not something which is in your control. It can happen any point of time. First important thing. Second important thing, an individual is confronting this, right? As an individual, I might be confronting that particular condition. Somebody else can be confronting. That means it cannot be taken it as a group level. It can be taken it as an individual level. More important thing, it can be an opportunity. It can be something which is out of demand, or it can be something related to the resources. We'll be discussing about demand and resource in this particular lecture in the upcoming time. And what happens in stress mostly, that why do we feel stress? We feel stress because the outcome is perceived to be uncertain and important. So whenever we are in confusion, whenever we are in ambiguity, whenever we are facing a situation where we have so many alternatives and we need to make a choice, so in that situation, we mostly face stress, right? So stress is not necessarily bad in itself. Although stress is taken or typically discussed in negative context, it can have a positive value also. So we need to understand one thing, that stress is not always negative. Stress can be positive as well. And for this, I will give you certain example. For example, some people like challenging job. Some people like stressful situations. I have seen so many athletes also, or sports person, who like to take pressure very positively, or they mostly perform in pressure situation. Most importantly, in a stressful situation, they will always come up with flying colors. We have so many people. If we can also take an example of Virat Kohli over here, he always liked to chase. And that is why in most of the sports magazines, I have also seen the name called the chase master. Why? Because he liked those pressure situations where he likes to perform under pressure. So with this, we need to understand one thing, that stress is not always negative. It can be positive also for certain people. Because as discussed, stress is at individual level. That means for A person, it could be a stressful situation, but for B person, it cannot be a stressful situation. This can be possible, right? Let's talk about second thing, that is called demand and resources. I've already told you that we'll be discussing the demand and resources. So demand are responsibilities, pressure, obligation, and even uncertainty that the individual face in the workplace. So whenever we are working in a workplace, we generally hold a particular designation. And based on the designation, we have certain responsibilities, we have certain pressure, certain obligation which we have to perform. There is always a pressure to perform, right? And because of that, we always face stress, because if we are not able to fulfill those demands, then we face a stressful situation. On the other side, resources are the things within an individual control that can be used to resolve those demands. So one thing that is from the environment, that is your demand, right? It is something which comes from organizational position or organizational setting or from organization culture. It is not in your control. On the other side, when we talk about resources are always in your control, because it is something which you can do to resolve all those demands, which you can perform. For example, your preparation is always in your control, right? You can prepare as per the demand, as per the resources. We can prepare always as per the requirement of your job. If you are preparing well, most probably you will not feel that much amount of stress as compared to those who are not preparing for it, right? Let's take an example also. Suppose we are taking a test for an annual performance review at work, you feel stress. Why some people feel stress? Because you confront opportunity and performance pressure. Most probably you are feeling pressure. Why? Because you want to get promoted, and that is the reason why this is an opportunity, right? You want to get promoted, this is an opportunity, and you will always have a performance pressure because you want to do it in the first time. Otherwise the next test may happen after 2 years or maybe after 3 years, and that will create a lot of stress, right? And so what can be the possible outcomes in this particular situation? First, a good performance may lead to promotion or greater responsibility or a higher salary. Obviously that is the outcome which we are expecting. On the other side, the second possible outcome, a poor performance may prevent you from setting the promotion, from getting the promotion. An extremely poor review may also result into being fired, right? So there are three possible outcomes. So if you are getting good performance, you will get promoted. If you will not get good, you might not be promoted, and in the very performance is very poor, then you may get fired also. So in that situation, you will always feel the stress, right? So in such a situation, you can apply resources to demands, right? How you can apply? You can prepare yourself. You can always obtain social support, take somebody's help. Most importantly, try to understand the exam, try to understand the pattern of the exam, and then in this way you will feel less stress. So resources are something which are in your control, whereas demand are something which is not in your control, right? Moving on. Next is, what are the potential sources of stress? So there are three levels of stress which we face. First is called the environmental level, second is called the organizational level, and third is called the personal level, right? So let's begin with the first one, and that is called environmental level. So what happens in environmental sources, that environmental sources are always something which are not in your control, right? It is always something which is external in nature. It is coming from external sources. So you will face the pressure, you will feel the stress because it is something which is not in your control. So for example, changes in the business cycle create economic uncertainties. Obviously, we all know that business goes through different cycle. Business can be at a starting level, it could be at growth level, it could be at maturity level, it could be at decline level. So every business has a cycle. So if the company is in the growth phase, obviously you have more opportunities to grow in that company. But if your business cycle, if your company's cycle is going through a maturity stage, then most probably your chances of getting growth also becomes very less. And that is why, because of this, you know that you are working into an industry whose life cycle is not going to grow from here. So in that situation, you will always feel stress because it is something which is coming from environment. You cannot control it. The second important thing is, political uncertainty causes stress as the government policies become unstable. If in your country the political scenario is not good, if the political stability is not there, then what happens is government policies cannot be, one cannot trust any government policy, because we all know that in a coalition government there is always possible that today we are making a policy, tomorrow we can withdraw it, and because of this everybody faces a stress, because business will face the stress, foreign investment will face the stress, and because of this the people at the individual level also faces the stress because they believe that government policy is not going to sustain for a longer period of time. So this is also another reason for environmental stress. The third important thing is technological change. And this is something which currently right now in today's scenario, this is one of the stress which everybody is facing right now. Because whatever we are studying right now, whatever we are doing right now may become obsolete in upcoming time. And because of this, everybody is feeling the pressure. Everybody is preparing for something which they believe that this could be the next thing. For example, somebody is reading about, somebody is preparing themselves for artificial intelligence, somebody is doing data analytics, somebody is doing data science, somebody is doing learning different kind of software into their particular field, because they are feeling the stress, because they know that in upcoming time there is a possibility that their job becomes irrelevant, because every new innovation will make the employee's skill and experience obsolete. And this has happened with so many industries. Let me take you an example of when computers were introduced in banking sector and in telecom sector, then what happened? All the old employees became obsolete because they were not knowing how to operate those computers. So it is important to understand that everything, these are certain environmental sources which are not in your control, but they can always give you stress. I hope the first point, the first potential source is clear. Moving on to the next one. and that is called organizational stress. Now, organizational stress can happen at three levels. First is task demand, second is called role demand, and third is called interpersonal demands. So let's begin with the first one, and that is called task demand. So in task demand, what happens is they are the factors related to the person's job. So whatever job you are doing, whatever task you are doing, that task demands something, and because of this you always face stress. So what can be those situations? First, that it could be related to autonomy of the job, that whether you have autonomy in your work environment or not. It could be related to task variety. You are getting certain kind of jobs, certain kind of task which you are not very familiar with. It could be a degree of automation also. For example, there is a lot of automation in the organization, and that is creating a lot of stress to you. Another important could be working conditions. The working condition is very stressful, or it could be very physically challenging, and because of that you always face stress. And it could be also physical work layout, that the physical structure of the organization is also not good. So this could be certain reasons which can give you stress and task demand. Working in an overcrowded room or in a visible location where noise and interruption are constantly can increase anxiety and stress also. Everybody wants to work in a peaceful environment, right? As an employee, we always want to be in a very peaceful and calm environment. On the other side, if your job is something related to high concentration job, so in that situation also you need certain kind of calmness into your room, into your physical setting. So if you are working in an overcrowded room or in a location where everybody is watching you, so in that situation you always feel anxiety and pressure and stress also. Imagine being a flight, let's take an example. So imagine being a flight attendant or a customer relationship officer. So we all know that flight attendant always greet people, right? We know that customer relationship officers also, they greet their customers. Why? Because even though if they are not happy or if they are facing a bad day in their own personal life, still they need to smile, they need to greet their passengers, right? And we all know that this happens, that if you have a bad day, still you need to greet them, greet the people around you. Why? Because that is what the job requirement is. So that is which always create stress, right? So these are certain task demands. Let's move on to the second one, and that is called role demands. So what are the various role demands? Role demands are the pressure placed on a person as a function or a particular role he or she plays in the organization. So whatever job you are doing, whatever function you are doing, because of that you faces certain stresses. So what are those stress which are related to job demand, role demand? So first one is role conflict. So role conflict creates expectation that may be hard to reconcile or satisfy. So what happens is sometimes what happens, you are doing a job in which you doesn't fit yourself. You don't find that job matches to your personality. So what happens, you always feel role conflict. You want to do X thing, but you are doing Y. And because of this, you always face role conflict, and because of this, you are not able to fulfill the expectations required for that particular role. The next important thing is role overload. So what happens is when the employee is expected to do more than what time permits. Sometimes what happens is a person can do 3 jobs or 3 tasks at one point of time, but we are giving him 5 tasks, 6 tasks, and we are believing that he will be able to do it. And he is not able to say no. Why? Because he wants to secure his job. So what will happen? He may not say no to the employer, but what will happen? This job overload or the role overload will not permit him to do those 5-6 jobs or 5-6 tasks, and because of this, he might face a lot of stress. So it is important to understand that we should always give people work as per their capabilities and as per what the time permits. The third important thing is role ambiguity. Role ambiguity is when the role expectations are not clear. The person is not knowing what is actually expected out of me. The employer is not able to convey that what you need to do and how you need to do. So when this are not clear, when the rules are not clear, when the job roles are not clear, then what happens is you always face that stress. So there are 3 reasons for role demand. First is role conflict, second is called role overload, and third is called role ambiguity. Moving on to the third type, and that is called interpersonal demands. So interpersonal demand is the pressure created by the other employees working with you. So when you are working in an organizational setting, we all know that there are hundreds of employees who are working with you at the same designation or at the same level, and you feel a pressure or you feel the competition from those people. So there is always a peer pressure due to high competition. leads to stress, right? Moving on to the second thing, lack of social support from the co-workers. When the people are not supporting you, when the people are not helping you, when the people are not guiding you, when the people are not mentoring you, people are not helping you in solving your queries, then you feel stress. You feel alone also in organizations. And let's move on to the third type of factors, and those are called personal factors. So what are personal factors? The typical individual works for 40 to 30 hours a week, right? We all know that in India also we mostly work for 5 days or maybe 6 days and mostly for 8 hours, right? So that makes around 48 to 40 hours of working in a week. But experiences and problem that people encounter in those other than 120 plus non-working hour each week can take over the job, right? We all know that after these 48 hours also, we have another 120 hours plus hours every week, which we spend with our family, with our friends, and that can take over your job also. So we are facing some stress at personal level, at our individual level, at our family level, but that is also affecting our job. So that can be completely possible, and that is called personal factor. So personal factor include family issues. It could also include the personal economic problems, and most importantly, it could also related to personal characteristics. That means if you are facing any issue at your family level, if you are facing some economic problem, financial issues, so that will create a lot of stress. For example, national surveys have clearly shown that the people hold family and their personal relationship dear to them, right? So people have always priority to their family and to their personal relationship as compared to job. And because of this, for example, if somebody is facing marital difficulties, somebody is breaking up within the relationship, somebody is having discipline in handling their children, so this will always create employee, or mostly I see that work-life balance is one thing that will always create stress. The people get over serious in their jobs and they are not able to manage their work-life balance. So because of this, they face a lot of stress. Another reason of personal factor that can lead to stress is the financial problem. What happens is, if our salary is 10,000 rupees and we are spending 20,000 rupees per month, then what will happen? This will create stress, right? So we need to understand what is our financial capabilities, and based on that only we should have our savings, and based on that only we can only spend. And because of this, that creates the financial burden and that can cause stress. So these are the certain factors which leads to stress. Moving on to the consequences of stress. So the first consequence we have is the physiological problems. So what are the physiological problems which we face? The physiological problems are related to medical and health related issues, right? So when the stress reach to a level, when it starts affecting your body, it affects your mind, it affects your mental health. So then that is where the physiological problems comes into picture. For example, lack of appetite, high blood pressure, lack of sleep, poor immune system, irritation, mood swing. These are all related to physical problems, and this creates a lot of stress. Moving on to the second one, that is called psychological problems. So in the psychological problems, we have job dissatisfaction. That is the primary reason of psychological stress. Second is tension. You face a lot of irritation. We face a lot of boredom, anxiety, procrastination. All this happens in psychological problems. So whenever we have a lot of stress, we'll always start cribbing. We'll always say that our job is not good. We are having tension all the time. We are feeling bored. The job is very monotonous. There is high level of politics. Because of this, we have anxiety. So because of this, we face a lot of psychological problems. And the third, that is called behavioral problems. So what are those behavioral problems? There are three mainly. First, it affects your productivity. So that means if the stress level is really high, your productivity level will come down, right? Second is absenteeism. You try to ignore the situation or avoid that situation, and that's why you try to be absent from your job profile. And third is turnover. Finally, when you are not able to take the stress, you leave the job, right? So these are certain consequences which we faces from the stress. Now another important issue which we are going to discuss in this topic is relationship between stress and job performance. It is a very important question, mostly asked in competitive exams also. So you can see this graph. This is called inverted U graph. Inverted U graph. So what happens in this inverted U graph? You can see that on one axis, that is your x-axis, we have stress, which is from low to high, and then on the y-axis we have productivity from low to high, right? So as the stress level is low, and this zone you can see the stress level is low, then our performance is also low. Why? Because the job is not challenging enough that we need to perform. So what we do, we becomes very comfortable, or we are not able to challenge ourselves, and because of this our performance is also very poor. We are not performing as per our potential. Then when the stress level get increased, mostly at the initial level, our performance also get increased. You can see in this particular area, the stress level is increasing, the performance level is also increasing, because we are able to take that stress, we are able to manage that stress, and we perform in that stress, and we come out with flying colors, right? And when the stress level goes to that high level that we are not able to manage it, that is where the performance goes down. So in this way, this particular inverted U graph works. So I hope this particular session was important to you and you understood this topic. Thanks for watching. If you really like my channel, do subscribe, like and share. And if you like to join my MCQ series, the link is in the description. You want to download this PPT or the PDF of these all my lectures, you can join my Telegram channel. That is also given in the description link. We'll be meeting in the next session. We'll be covering up the second part of this lecture. Thanks for watching. We'll be meeting in the next lecture. Bye bye.